Civilization is one of the most commonly used words in history, politics, and everyday conversation. We talk about ancient civilizations, modern civilization, and even describe certain behaviors as civilized or uncivilized. Yet, despite how often the word is used, its meaning is not always clearly understood. Before we can properly explain how civilizations rise, develop, decline, or collapse, we must first understand what civilization actually means. At its simplest level, civilization refers to an advanced stage of human social development. It describes the process through which human beings move from small, scattered communities into large, complex, and organized societies. These societies are usually characterized by structured governments, laws, cities, economic systems, technology, culture, and shared values. Civilization, therefore, is not a single invention or event. It is a long and gradual process shaped by human choices and historical conditions. Different dictionaries and scholars define civilization in slightly different ways, each emphasizing certain features over others. When these definitions are compared, they help us gain a broader and deeper understanding of the concept. The Oxford English Dictionary defines civilization as the stage of human social and cultural development and organization that is considered most advanced. This definition highlights two key ideas: development and organization. According to this view, civilization is something that evolves over time as societies become more complex and better organized. It also suggests that civilization involves culture, institutions, and systems that distinguish advanced societies from simpler ones. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary offers a more specific interpretation. It describes civilization as a relatively high level of cultural and technological development, especially the stage at which writing and the keeping of written records are achieved. This definition places strong emphasis on writing. Writing allows societies to preserve laws, history, religious beliefs, scientific knowledge, and cultural traditions. Because of this, historians often say that recorded history begins where writing begins. The Cambridge Dictionary defines civilization as human society with well-developed social organizations, or as the culture and way of life of a society or country. This explanation shifts attention away from technology alone and focuses more on social relationships, cultural practices, and everyday life. It reminds us that civilization is not only about cities or machines, but also about how people live together, cooperate, and share values. Similarly, the Collins Dictionary defines civilization as an advanced stage of social development in which people live in towns and cities and have developed systems of government, laws, and communication. This definition connects civilization closely with urban life and formal institutions. According to this view, civilization emerges when societies create stable systems that regulate behavior and maintain order on a large scale. Beyond dictionaries, historians and scholars have also contributed important ideas about civilization. The historian E.H. Carr viewed civilization as the result of continuous interaction between humans and their environment. He emphasized that civilization is shaped by social needs, economic systems, political institutions, and human decisions. From this perspective, civilization is not predetermined or fixed, but constantly changing as people respond to new challenges and circumstances. The archaeologist V. Gordon Childe offered one of the most influential scholarly explanations of civilization through his concept of the urban revolution. According to Childe, civilization is marked by the rise of permanent cities, division of labor, social classes, surplus food production, long-distance trade, organized religion, monumental architecture, and the development of writing. For him, civilization begins when societies produce more than they immediately need, allowing specialization and complex institutions to develop. When all these definitions are compared, it becomes clear that no single explanation fully captures the meaning of civilization. Instead, civilization is best understood as a combination of several interconnected elements. These include organized government, legal systems, urban centers, economic activity beyond basic survival, cultural expression, technological advancement, and written communication. In simple terms, civilization can be described as the complex way human beings organize life on a large scale. It reflects humanity's ability to cooperate, create institutions, preserve knowledge, and adapt to changing conditions over long periods of time. Defining civilization is important because it influences how history is written and understood. Earlier historians often used narrow definitions that favored European societies, while ignoring or undervaluing civilizations in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Modern historical studies now recognize that civilization developed independently in many parts of the world, each following its own unique path shaped by environment, culture, and historical experience. Now that we have a clear understanding of what civilization means, the next important question is how civilizations come into existence in the first place. Why do some societies develop complex institutions, cities, and technologies, while others remain small and less organized? To answer these questions, historians have developed various theories of civilization. In the next section, we will begin by examining one of the most influential of these ideas, the social contract theory. Now, as we move into the theories that explain how civilizations emerge, grow, and sometimes decline, it is important to have a simple way of remembering them. History involves many ideas, and without a good memory aid, it is easy to get confused. To make things easier and more organized, we will be using a simple acronym throughout this discussion. The acronym we will use is TEMS-DCC. This acronym will serve as a guide, helping us remember the major theories of civilization in a logical and systematic way. Each letter in the acronym represents a particular theory that historians and scholars have used to explain the development of civilization. By following this pattern, you will find it easier to recall the theories during examinations, lectures, discussions, or even casual conversations about history.
Let us now begin with the first theory in our acronym, TEMS-DCC, which is the technological theory of civilization. This theory focuses on one powerful idea, that the level of technology available to a society plays a major role in determining how advanced that society becomes. In other words, civilizations rise, grow, and sometimes dominate others largely because of the tools, machines, and technologies they develop and use. The technological theory argues that human progress is driven by innovation. Whenever humans invent new tools or discover better ways of doing things, their way of life changes. These changes affect how people farm, how they trade, how they fight wars, how they communicate, and how they govern themselves. Over time, these technological changes accumulate and lead to the formation of complex societies that we describe as civilizations. One of the earliest and most important examples supporting this theory is the Neolithic Revolution, which began around 10,000 years ago. Before this period, human beings lived mainly as hunters and gatherers, constantly moving from place to place in search of food. However, the discovery of agriculture and the domestication of animals changed everything. With farming came permanent settlements, population growth, food surpluses, and specialization of labor. People could now become farmers, potters, builders, priests, or traders. This technological shift laid the foundation for the first civilizations in places like Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and China. Technology also played a critical role in the growth of ancient civilizations through the development of tools made from bronze and later iron. The Iron Age went even further, allowing societies to produce cheaper and more durable tools on a large scale. Civilizations that mastered iron technology often gained advantages over their neighbors, expanding their influence through conquest and trade. Another powerful illustration of the technological theory can be seen in the Industrial Revolution of the 18th and 19th centuries. During this period, European societies experienced rapid technological change with the invention of machines such as the steam engine, spinning jenny, and power loom. These innovations transformed small-scale manual production into large-scale industrial manufacturing. As a result, cities expanded, transportation improved, economies grew rapidly, and modern industrial civilization emerged. Countries that industrialized early became global powers, while those that did not were often economically and politically dominated. Communication technology also supports the technological theory of civilization. The invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in the 15th century revolutionized the spread of knowledge. Books became cheaper and more accessible, literacy increased, and new ideas spread rapidly across Europe. This technological breakthrough contributed significantly to major historical developments such as the Renaissance, the Protestant Reformation, and the Scientific Revolution. In this sense, technology did not just change how people lived, it changed how they thought. In the modern world, digital technology provides another strong example of how technology shapes civilization. The development of computers, the internet, and artificial intelligence has transformed communication, education, commerce, governance, and even human relationships. Societies with advanced technological infrastructure now dominate global politics and the world economy. This reinforces the argument of the technological theory that technological advancement is a key driver of civilization.
However, while the technological theory explains many aspects of civilization, it is not without criticism. One major criticism is that technology alone cannot explain the success or failure of civilizations. History shows that some societies possessed advanced technology but still declined due to political corruption, social inequality, economic instability, or poor leadership. For example, the Roman Empire had impressive engineering achievements such as roads, aqueducts, and architectural structures, yet it eventually collapsed due to internal decay and external pressures. Similarly, during the Islamic Golden Age, between the 8th and 14th centuries, Muslim scholars made remarkable advances in science, medicine, mathematics, and astronomy. Despite this high level of technological and intellectual achievement, political fragmentation and external invasions weakened the civilization. This shows that while technology is important, it must be supported by strong institutions, effective leadership, and social cohesion. Now let's move on to the next letter in our acronym TEMCC, which is E, standing for the Environmental Theory of Civilization. This theory asks a very simple but powerful question. How much does nature influence human progress? In other words, did civilizations succeed because of human intelligence alone, or because they were lucky enough to live in favorable environments? The environmental theory argues that geography, climate, rivers, soil, and natural resources play a major role in shaping civilizations. According to this view, where people live strongly affects how they live. Their environment influences what they eat, how they build homes, how they travel, how they trade, and even how their societies are organized. Civilization, therefore, is not just a human achievement, but also a product of nature. Think about it for a moment. Early humans depended heavily on their surroundings for survival. Areas with fertile land made farming easier. Rivers provided water for drinking, irrigation, and transportation. Mild climates allowed people to settle permanently, while harsh environments made survival more difficult. Over time, societies in favorable environments were able to produce surplus food, support larger populations, and develop complex institutions. This is exactly what the environmental theory is trying to explain. One of the most famous examples of this theory is ancient Egypt. Egypt's civilization developed along the Nile River, which flooded regularly and left behind rich, fertile soil. This made agriculture predictable and productive. Because food was abundant, Egyptians could support priests, scribes, builders, and rulers. The river also served as a natural highway, making transportation and communication easier. In this sense, the Nile was not just a river, it was the foundation of Egyptian civilization. Another classic example is Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. These rivers supported early city-states like Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon. Although flooding in Mesopotamia was less predictable than in Egypt, the fertile land still encouraged agriculture and settlement. Over time, people developed irrigation systems to control water, showing how environment pushed humans to innovate. Civilization here was born out of both opportunity and challenge. The environmental theory also helps explain why some regions developed civilizations earlier than others. Areas with domesticable plants and animals such as wheat, barley, cattle, and sheep had an advantage. Societies in these regions could shift from hunting and gathering to farming much earlier, giving them a head start in population growth and technological development. This idea was strongly emphasized by the modern scholar Jared Diamond in his book Guns, Germs, and Steel. But the environmental theory does not claim that nature determines everything. In fact, some of the most impressive civilizations emerged in difficult environments. A good example is the Inca Empire. The Incas lived in the Andes Mountains, a region with steep slopes, cold temperatures, and limited flat land. Instead of giving up, they adapted by developing terrace farming, advanced road networks, and efficient administrative systems. This shows that while environment shapes civilization, human creativity also plays a crucial role. The Mongol Empire offers another interesting case. The Mongols lived on the harsh Central Asian steppes, an environment with little farming potential, yet they adapted by mastering horse riding and mobile warfare. Their environment did not limit them. Instead, it shaped a unique form of civilization based on mobility, military skill, and conquest. This challenges the idea that only resource-rich environments can produce powerful civilizations. In the modern world, the environmental theory can still be applied. Take Singapore, for example. Singapore has very few natural resources and limited land. According to a strict environmental explanation, it should have struggled. However, through strategic location, trade, education, and strong governance, Singapore became a global economic hub. This shows that while environment matters, it does not act alone. Because of examples like these, critics argue that the environmental theory can sometimes sound too deterministic, as if humans are completely controlled by nature. History shows that human decisions, leadership, culture, and innovation often overcome environmental limitations. Nature sets the stage, but humans still write the script. Now let's move to the next letter in our acronym, M, which stands for the multilinear evolution theory of civilization. This theory challenges one of the oldest assumptions in history, the idea that all civilizations develop in the same way or follow the same path. Instead of seeing civilization as a single straight road, this theory asks us to imagine many different roads, all leading to different kinds of societies. The multilinear evolution theory was developed mainly by the anthropologist Julian Stewart. His central argument was simple but revolutionary. Human societies evolve differently depending on their environment, culture, resources, and historical experiences. There is no single correct model of civilization. What works for one society may not work for another, and that difference does not make one superior to the other. For a long time, early European historians believed that civilization followed a linear path, from savagery to barbarism, and finally to civilization, with Europe conveniently placed at the top. Multilinear evolution theory strongly rejects this idea. It argues that such thinking is biased and ignores the diversity of human experience. Civilization, according to this theory, does not move in a straight line, and it does not end in one final destination.
One of the best ways to understand this theory is through real historical examples. Take Mesoamerican civilizations, such as the Maya and the Aztecs. These societies developed advanced calendars, complex religious systems, monumental architecture, and sophisticated forms of writing. However, they did not use the wheel for transportation in the same way Eurasian civilizations did. According to linear theories, this might be seen as a weakness, but multilinear evolution theory argues that it was simply a different path of development, shaped by geography and social needs. Another strong example is the Indus Valley civilization. This civilization developed well-planned cities, advanced drainage systems, standardized bricks, and organized urban layouts. Yet, unlike Mesopotamia or Egypt, it left behind very few readable written records. Despite this, it functioned effectively for centuries. This shows that writing, while important, is not the only indicator of a successful civilization. Japan provides a powerful modern example of multilinear development. Unlike European nations that industrialized gradually over several centuries, Japan modernized rapidly during the Meiji Restoration in the late 19th century. It selectively adopted Western technology while preserving its cultural identity, social hierarchy, and traditions. Japan's path to modern civilization was neither European nor traditional Asian. It was uniquely Japanese. This theory also helps us understand African civilizations more clearly. Societies such as Great Zimbabwe, the Nok culture, and the Swahili city-states developed in ways that reflected their environments, trade networks, and cultural values. They did not copy European models of civilization, yet they were complex, organized, and influential in their regions. Multilinear evolution theory allows us to study these civilizations on their own terms, rather than judging them by foreign standards. One of the major strengths of the multilinear evolution theory is that it promotes cultural respect and historical fairness. It reminds us that civilization is not about ranking societies from backward to advanced, but about understanding how different societies solved different problems in different ways. It encourages historians to ask better questions, such as why a society developed the way it did, rather than why it failed to resemble another society. However, critics argue that this theory can sometimes be too flexible. Because it accepts many paths of development, it can be difficult to use it to predict patterns or make clear comparisons between civilizations. Some historians feel that it lacks a strong structure, making it harder to apply systematically. Even so, its value lies in its ability to capture the complexity and diversity of human history. In summary, the multilinear evolution theory teaches us that civilization does not have a single blueprint. Different societies develop in different ways based on their unique environments, cultures, and historical challenges. By understanding this theory, we learn to appreciate the many forms civilization can take and to move beyond narrow or biased interpretations of history. Now let's move on to the next letter in our acronym TEMS-DCCC, which is S, standing for the social contract theory of civilization. This theory focuses less on nature or technology and more on people themselves. It asks an important question. How did human beings move from living independently to living together under rules, laws, and governments?
The social contract theory explains civilization as the result of an agreement among people to live together in an organized society. According to this idea, Civilization did not begin by accident. Instead, it began when people realized that living without rules was dangerous and unstable. To create order, safety, and cooperation, individuals agreed to give up some personal freedom in exchange for protection and stability provided by society and government. Philosophers such as Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau developed this theory, though each explained it in a slightly different way. They all began with the idea of a state of nature, which refers to life before organized society and government. In this state, there were no laws, no formal leadership, and no institutions to control human behavior. Thomas Hobbes described the state of nature as a terrifying condition where life was, in his famous words, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. According to Hobbes, people were driven by fear and self-interest, constantly fighting for survival. To escape this chaos, humans agreed to submit to a strong central authority. This agreement formed the foundation of civilization, law, and government. John Locke had a more optimistic view. He believed that people in the state of nature had natural rights, such as the right to life, liberty, and property. However, these rights were not always protected. To secure them, people agreed to form governments. For Locke, civilization exists to protect human rights, and if a government fails to do so, the people have the right to change or remove it. Jean-Jacques Rousseau took a different approach. He argued that humans were naturally good, but became corrupted by inequality and private property. Civilization, according to Rousseau, was created when people agreed to live under laws that represented the general will of the community. In this sense, true civilization exists when laws serve everyone equally, not just the powerful. The social contract theory helps explain how organized political systems developed. As populations grew larger, informal customs were no longer enough to maintain order. Laws, courts, leaders, and institutions became necessary. Civilization, from this perspective, is built on cooperation, shared rules, and collective responsibility. Historical examples help make this theory clearer. Ancient Athens in the 5th century BCE practiced direct democracy, where citizens participated in decision-making through debates and voting. While not perfect, this system reflected the idea that political authority came from the people. Citizens accepted laws because they had a role in creating them. The Roman Republic also reflects social contract ideas. Roman citizens elected leaders, followed written laws such as the 12 Tables, and believed that government existed to serve the common good. Although Roman society was unequal, the idea that law should govern both rulers and the ruled was a major step towards civilized governance. A more modern example is the United States Constitution of 1787. The American political system was built on the idea that government power comes from the consent of the governed. Citizens agree to obey laws in exchange for the protection of their rights. This reflects classic social contract thinking and shows how the theory continues to influence modern civilization. Despite its strengths, the social contract theory has faced criticism. Many historians argue that civilization did not always emerge through peaceful agreement. In many cases, states were formed through conquest, force, or domination rather than consent. Empires such as Assyria and Persia expanded by military power, forcing people into their systems of rule. Feudal societies in medieval Europe also challenged the theory. Kings ruled by divine authority, and peasants had little say in governance. Social hierarchy, not agreement, shaped these societies. This raises questions about whether the social contract truly explains all civilizations or only certain political systems. Even with these criticisms, the social contract theory remains important. It helps us understand why laws exist, why governments claim legitimacy, and why citizens expect protection and justice in return for obedience. Civilization, according to this theory, is not just about cities or technology, but about trust, cooperation, and shared responsibility. In summary, the social contract theory explains civilization as a human choice to live together under agreed rules. It emphasizes cooperation over chaos and order over disorder. While it may not explain every civilization, it remains one of the most influential ideas for understanding how organized societies and political systems came into existence. Now we move to the next letter in our acronym, D, which stands for the divine right theory of civilization. This theory looks at civilization from a very different angle. Instead of focusing on human agreements, environmental factors, or technology, it asks, what if the authority to rule comes directly from God? In other words, some civilizations were built on the belief that rulers were chosen by a higher power, and that obeying the king or emperor was the same as obeying the gods themselves. The divine right theory was especially popular in ancient and medieval societies, where religion and governance were deeply intertwined. Thinkers like Robert Filmer and Jacques-Bénigne Bossuet argued that kings were God's representatives on earth. According to them, questioning the ruler was not just political rebellion, it was a moral and spiritual crime. This gave rulers extraordinary power, often allowing them to govern without checks or opposition.
One of the earliest examples comes from ancient Egypt. Pharaohs, like Ramses II, were considered gods on earth. Their word was law, and their authority extended over both the religious and political spheres. Egyptians believed that the stability of their civilization depended on the pharaoh maintaining harmony with the gods. Obeying the pharaoh was essential for order, prosperity, and even survival, because the king was thought to control the natural and spiritual world. Another influential form of this idea is found in China, with the concept of the mandate of heaven. Chinese emperors were seen as chosen by divine will. However, the mandate was conditional. If a ruler became corrupt or weak, it was believed that the gods would withdraw their support, allowing rebellion or a new dynasty to rise. This created a system where divine authority justified political power, but also allowed civilization to adapt through the replacement of failing leaders. A later European example is Louis XIV of France, who famously declared, "I am the state." Louis ruled as an absolute monarch, claiming that his authority came directly from God. For him, laws, taxes, and the government itself were under his control. People were expected to obey without question because to challenge the king was considered a challenge to divine order. While the divine right theory helped stabilize many civilizations by giving rulers unquestionable authority, it also faced criticism and eventual decline. Over time, people began to challenge the idea that rulers were above the law. The English Civil War in the 17th century, for example, ended with King Charles I being overthrown and executed, despite his claim of divine right. Similarly, the French Revolution in 1789 abolished the monarchy and executed King Louis XVI, signaling the rise of a new idea that political authority comes from the people, not God. Despite these challenges, the divine right theory had a lasting impact on civilization. It helped explain why some societies maintained centralized control for centuries, why rulers often had religious as well as political power, and why obedience was considered a moral duty. In many ways, it shaped the structures, hierarchies, and laws of early civilizations. In summary, the divine right theory explains civilization through the lens of religion and divine authority. It emphasizes that some societies were held together not just by human agreements or technology, but by belief in sacred power and ordained rulers. While it may not explain every civilization, it remains a key perspective for understanding how faith, politics, and governance interacted in human history.
Now we come to the first C in our acronym, TEMS, DCCC, which stands for the Cyclical Theory of Civilization. This theory looks at history in a very natural, almost biological way. Imagine civilizations like living things. They are born, they grow, they reach their peak, and eventually they age and decline. Just like plants, animals, or humans, civilizations have life cycles. This is the essence of the cyclical theory. Historians like Oswald Spengler, Arnold Toynbee, and even the medieval scholar Ibn Khaldun developed versions of this idea. They argued that civilizations are not immortal. They rise, they achieve great power, influence, and stability, and then they eventually weaken and fall. According to this view, decline is not necessarily caused by one single factor. It is often the result of a combination of internal problems and external pressures. Think about the Roman Empire. It began as a small city in Italy, grew to a republic, and then expanded into a vast empire stretching across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. At its peak, Rome was a center of law, culture, architecture, and military power. Yet, over time, internal corruption, economic troubles, political instability, and repeated invasions by barbarian tribes gradually weakened the empire, ultimately leading to its fall in 476 CE. The Roman Empire perfectly illustrates the life cycle of birth, growth, maturity, decline, and collapse.
The Ottoman Empire provides another example. Beginning in the late 13th century, the Ottomans expanded into much of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. They achieved remarkable cultural, military, and economic accomplishments. But by the 19th and early 20th centuries, internal problems, wars, and changing global dynamics caused the empire to weaken, eventually dissolving after World War I. Once again, we see the cyclical pattern of civilization. Even the Maya civilization of Central America fits this pattern. The Maya built impressive cities, developed complex calendars, and created intricate systems of mathematics and writing. Yet, between 800 and 900 CE, many of these great cities were abandoned. Scholars believe that environmental problems, wars, and overpopulation contributed to the civilization's decline. While the cyclical theory provides a useful framework for understanding the rise and fall of civilizations, it is not without its critics. Some historians point out that civilizations can recover or reinvent themselves. China, for example, experienced periods of decline, followed by resurgence, creating a continuous civilization that has lasted thousands of years. Similarly, modern nations such as Japan and Germany recovered from devastating wars to become major global powers, showing that the cycle is not always predictable or absolute. The strength of the cyclical theory lies in its ability to help us see patterns over long periods of history. It reminds us that power, wealth, and stability are often temporary. It encourages civilizations to be vigilant, adaptable, and aware that internal decay or external pressures can undermine even the greatest societies. Yet it also invites us to consider human agency, innovation, and resilience, because collapse is not inevitable if societies respond wisely to challenges. In summary, the cyclical theory of civilization teaches that civilizations, like living beings, have natural life cycles. They emerge, grow, reach their peak, and may eventually decline or collapse. While not every society follows the same pattern, this theory provides a valuable lens through which to study history, helping us understand that the glory of a civilization is often temporary and must be actively maintained. Now we move to the second C in our acronym, TEAMS, DCCC, which stands for the conflict theory of civilization. This theory looks at civilization through a very human lens, through struggle, competition, and inequality. Unlike theories that focus on agreements, geography, or technology, conflict theory asks a simple but powerful question. How does tension between different groups in society shape history and civilization? The conflict theory was developed mainly by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. They argued that human history is fundamentally a story of struggles between social classes. In any society, there are those who have wealth, power, and control, and there are those who are poor, oppressed, or marginalized. According to Marx and Engels, civilizations change and develop when these groups clash, when the oppressed challenge the powerful, and new social systems emerge as a result. One of the clearest examples of this theory in action is the French Revolution of 1789. The common people, burdened by high taxes and lack of political representation, revolted against the nobility and monarchy. The revolution led to the fall of Louis XVI, the end of absolute monarchy, and the emergence of democratic ideas. Here, the struggle between the oppressed and the powerful directly shaped the trajectory of civilization. Another powerful example is the Russian Revolution of 1917. Workers, peasants, and soldiers overthrew the Tsarist autocracy, leading to the establishment of a socialist state. The conflict between the classes, the ruling elite, and the oppressed majority was the engine driving dramatic social and political change. This illustrates the conflict theory perfectly. Social struggles are not obstacles to civilization, but engines of transformation.
The Haitian Revolution also demonstrates this principle. Enslaved Africans in Haiti rose up against French colonial rule, ultimately creating the first independent Black republic in the modern world. This was a direct result of social, economic, and political conflict. The revolution transformed society and reshaped global perceptions of slavery and freedom. While the conflict theory explains many historical changes, it is not without criticism. Not all developments in civilization result from class struggle. Religion, geography, technology, leadership, and culture also play significant roles. Some historians argue that overemphasizing conflict can oversimplify history and ignore cooperation, trade, and cultural exchange, which are also essential in shaping civilizations. Even so, the conflict theory remains extremely useful for understanding the dynamics of social change. It teaches us that civilizations are not static or peaceful by default. They are often forged through tension, negotiation, and struggle of oppressed groups to achieve justice and equality. By looking at history through this lens, we gain insight into the forces that drive social and political change across time and space. Finally, we come to the last C in our acronym THEMS DCC, which stands for the challenge theory of civilization. This theory takes a slightly different approach from all the others we've discussed. Instead of focusing on agreement, divine authority, environment, technology, or conflict, it asks a simple but powerful question. What happens when civilizations face challenges? And how a society responds to these challenges determines whether it grows, thrives, or declines. The challenge theory was most famously developed by Arnold Toynbee, a British historian. Toynbee believed that civilizations are like living organisms. They survive by solving problems. Every civilization faces challenges, whether environmental, social, political, or economic. The key is adaptation. If a society rises to the challenge, it grows stronger and achieves new heights. If it fails, it weakens, declines, and may eventually collapse. Let's take some examples to make this concrete. Think about ancient Greece. The Greeks faced many challenges: rocky terrain that made farming difficult, frequent wars between city-states, and threats from powerful neighbors. Instead of breaking down under these pressures, they adapted. Athens and Sparta developed unique political and military systems, specialized economies, and advanced cultures.
Greece not only survived its challenges, but also created a civilization that has influenced the world for thousands of years.
And that's a wrap for today's journey through the fascinating world of civilizations with our TEMS DCCC guide. We've explored how humans built societies, how they thrived, how they struggled, and how they sometimes fell. But this is just the beginning. Now, I want you to stay curious, because in our next video, we're going to travel even further back, all the way to the very beginnings of humanity. We'll uncover the mysteries of the prehistoric periods, from the earliest Stone Age tools to the first sparks of culture, art, and survival. Imagine walking alongside our ancient ancestors as they discover fire for the first time, craft their first tools, and start building the foundations of the world we know today. Who were they? How did they live? And what secrets from the distant past still echo in our lives today? You won't want to miss it.